So we've previously discussed firms in a perfectly competitive market who have no control over the price that they should charge for their product. And we've discussed firms in monopoly markets who have control over their price in the sense that when they set their level of output, they are able to change the price because of consumers' willingness to pay for their product changing depending on how much of their product is available. But what we've talked about so far have been firms that only charge a single price to every customer. And so specifically for a monopolist, we saw that this means the marginal revenue is always lower than the price because lowering price because lowering the price means that you increase your number of customers, your sales, your output, but you had to lower the price for everybody, including those who maybe were willing to pay a higher price. And so you lose some of your revenue off of those existing customers who would have paid a higher price, because when you lower the price, you lower it for everyone. That's not always the case. And here we'll discuss another tool that sometimes can be used by a monopolist or any other firm that has some market power, and that is price discrimination. So price discrimination exists whenever a firm is able to sell the same good or service at different prices to different groups of customers. So lowering the price for a certain customer doesn't necessarily mean you have to lower it for others. But one key to this price discrimination concept is that the difference in price is not related to your cost of providing the service. So this is not, what would not be price discrimination is charging a different price. Say you're a plumber and you go next door to fix a toilet versus going across town to fix a toilet. You would obviously generally charge the person across town more than the person next door, but that's related to your cost of providing the service. That's because you had to travel. It took you time, and it took your vehicle maintenance, your gasoline, all those things to get across town. And so that's not the same thing as price discrimination. That's charging a different price because it costs you something different to provide the service. Price discrimination is specifically when it costs you nothing different to provide the service to two groups of customers, but you do charge different prices to those different groups of customers. And we will see, as we continue with the discussion, that price discrimination is beneficial. It can allow markets to work more efficiently. But, question for you, is it legal? Think about that. Is it legal to charge different people different prices for exactly the same product? Discrimination usually has a negative connotation in the way that we use it, and discrimination on a non-market characteristic causes market inefficiencies. So if you discriminate based on something that has nothing to do with a person's ability to provide a service or ability to pay for a service, then that can cause inefficiencies in a market. But the type of discrimination that actually makes markets work more efficiently is when you discriminate based on a market characteristic. So we'll see that when you discriminate based on your customer's ability and willingness to pay, that's a market characteristic, a characteristic that's directly related to the transaction that's taking place in the market. And when you do that, then it is beneficial and it is legal. So you know of several examples of when this happens. So college tuition. Not everyone pays the same amount for the same education. You could be sitting in this exact same class, and maybe you're an athlete. You pay less than others because you have a scholarship. Maybe you're an out-of-state student, so you pay more than others because you pay out-of-state tuition. You're paying different amounts of tuition for exactly the same class. Airline tickets. Anytime you fly, if you look at the person next to you, you guys are going from point A to point B together. and with exactly the same amenities if it's the person sitting next to you. So this is not talking about first class versus economy class, because those are two different products. It certainly makes sense for those two products to have two different prices, but even the person right next to you on the same row in economy class probably paid a different price than you based on when they purchased their tickets. Prices of a movie at a theater. Are you going to a matinee, or are you going to the same exact movie in the evening? A hardcover versus paperback book. You got exactly the same material, but you paid more or less for it depending on how it's covered. Again, with textbooks, you could get the same material if you get the U.S. edition versus the international edition. I've had students freak out because they get a textbook that has some language other than English on the cover, but then I just tell them, open it. You open it up and it's English inside, and it's exactly the same book, but it was cheaper because it was the international edition. And then there's other sorts of discounts like military discounts, student discounts, senior discounts, those sorts of things. Those are all examples of price discrimination that we see every day in our markets. In order to successfully price discriminate, two conditions have to be met. First, the firm has to be able to distinguish groups of buyers with different price elasticities of demand or different willingness to pay. So if I can't tell the difference between a student and a non-student, then I can't offer a student discount, right? I have to be able to tell the difference between two types of buyers. And then I also have to be able to prevent resale of the good or service. Let's look a little more closely at these two. So first, I have to be able to distinguish groups of buyers with different price elasticities of demand. And the general rule is, if I can do that, if I can distinguish these two types of buyers or different types of buyers, then I want to charge a higher price to those with relatively inelastic demand. Why? Because inelastic demand means I can raise the price on them and they won't go away. They're insensitive to price. They're willing to pay a higher price, and so charge them a higher price. And on the flip side, charge a lower price to those elastic customers who are sensitive to price, because they may need a discount just to get them in the door, right? So I'll charge a lower price just to get these guys to come over to my business and buy something to start with, where I can maintain a higher price for those who are willing to stick around when I have higher prices. How do you do that? How do you distinguish among different groups? One may be easily observable characteristics. So you can distinguish based on, I don't know, gender, for example. So ladies' night at the bar, those sorts of things, easily observable characteristics, or things where people have, say, an ID. So a student ID, it makes it easy to observe whether you're a student or not. A driver's license or some sort of ID with your birthday on it makes it easy to observe whether you're a senior or not. And then sometimes you can set up a system where consumers identify themselves. So this is the movie theater example. The customers who don't want to pay high prices for movies are the ones who will show up at 11 a.m. for the matinee, right? They identify themselves as the matinee type by showing up at a particular time of day. So they, in a sense, self-select into these groups and identify themselves when they choose which group they're going to be in. So that's the first rule to be able to practice good price discrimination, is you need to be able to distinguish different groups of customers who have different elasticity of demand, and then charge higher prices to those with inelastic demand and lower prices to those with elastic demand. The second rule is you have to be able to prevent resale. Why is that? So let's consider an example. Suppose your university is selling a popular magazine called You Magazine. Everybody on campus loves them, students and faculty alike, and they're sold according to this pricing scheme. Faculty price $2 and student price $1. What does the smart student do? The smart student buys a bunch of them for $1 and goes and sells them to faculty for $1.50, right? If you can't prevent resale, then you can't price discriminate. You get people buying them at the lower price and reselling them to the other group at a price that's somewhere in between, so mutually beneficial for both. So you have to be able to prevent resale. And how do you do that? Some examples: airlines require a photo ID. Whoever purchased the ticket for the airplane for the flight is the one who has to be the one to board the flight. You have to have a photo ID. Your movie ticket is time stamped. You can't, if your theater's paying attention, you can't show up and buy your 11 o'clock ticket and then come back at 9 o'clock to watch the movie with that ticket. Non-transferable warranties. So if a company is charging different prices for to different customers, they can keep you from reselling by saying, well, if you do resell, the warranty doesn't go with the product. Adulteration of the product. So this one's interesting. So one example of this, adulteration, just meaning that you tamper with, you do something to the product. So an example is in plastics. The same producer will sell plastic to a dentist and to an industry at different prices. So they'll charge a dentist a really high price, and they'll then go sell them for industrial uses at a lower price. And to prevent resale, they actually add some substance to what they sell to industry, like arsenic, that keeps the dentist from being able to use that. So then the industrial uses can't purchase it at the lower price and resell to a dentist, because what they're purchasing has been adulterated. It's been modified in such a way that the dentist can't use it. And then another way to prevent resale is to price discriminate with services rather than goods. So you can't get your toilet fixed in your house and resell that to someone else. You can't resell your plumbing service to someone else. Price discrimination actually works really well in services rather than goods. So why would you do this? Why would you, as a firm, practice price discrimination? So let's look at an example. So if we've got here pictures of two airlines, right? So Flat Earth Air and Discriminating Flyers. Flat Earth Air is an airline that's a monopoly, and they have to charge a single price. So this is the monopolist that we've talked about previously, where they're going to set their level of output at the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and then they're going to determine their price based on what consumers are willing to pay at that price. So even though there are 200 seats on this airplane, to maximize profit, they're only going to sell 100 of them, and they're going to charge a price of $300 for them, and their profit then will be $20,000, the area of this rectangle. That's the case if they can only charge a single price to everyone, right? If they charge the same price to all customers. If, however, they're able to price discriminate, if they can figure out that which ones of their customers are willing to pay more, then they can squeeze a little more revenue or profit out of this. And this is how. So how does an airline determine who's willing to pay more? A lot of times it's based on when you're purchasing your flight, right? So if you're the last minute buyer, then there's some reason that you are looking for an airline ticket at the very last minute, right? You've got to get somewhere and you've got to get there fast. Otherwise, if you're just planning a family vacation, you probably did that several months in advance, and you're looking at flights. And if the flights are super expensive, you've got time to think about other ways of getting there. You can either not go on that vacation, or you could go by train, or you could drive, or something different. So airlines can tell the elasticity of their customer based on the time that you're buying your ticket. If you're buying your ticket way in advance, then you probably are more of an elastic customer. You have more options. You're planning ahead. You can think about other options. If you're buying your ticket right at the time, a day or two or an hour or two before the plane takes off, you're willing to pay a lot for that ticket because there's some reason that you're looking at the last minute. And so what they can do is charge a high price to the last 50 customers who come through the door. You know those folks, for the last 50 customers are the ones willing to pay a lot for their ticket because they've got to get on that plane. Their sister's having a baby and they got to get there, right? Whatever's happening. But everybody else, everybody who came in early, you're going to charge them $200 instead of $400. So in that way, you get more people in the door than you could with a price of $300. When you had a single price, you were only serving 100 customers. Now that you're able to give a discount to those who buy early, you can get 150 customers in the door, right? And so what does that do to your revenues? By charging that premium, that higher price to the last 50 customers, you get an additional profit, right? Those folks that you were over here, you were stuck charging them $300. Now you can hike the price up on them because you understand something about their elasticity, and you can earn an extra $100 off of each of those customers. So you get additional profit from them. But at the same time, when you have your discounted price for everyone else, you've got a couple of things going on. One, you get additional profit from that discounted price bringing more customers in the door. So rather than only having 100 people on the plane, now you have 150 people on the plane. And so you make $5,000 off of those extra 50 people who buy your product because you were able to offer that lower price. And you lose a little bit on those few people who, notice over here, they were willing to pay you the $300, but you're charging them only the $200, right? So you lose a little bit on some folks who will come in and get that discount, who maybe you didn't have to offer the discount to, but you make up for it by getting new customers in the door and by being able to charge a higher price to those who come in at the last minute. And so this is why you would price discriminate. You actually can increase your profits if you price discriminate versus if you charge everyone the same amount of money. So this is sort of what an airline does, right? If you're buying 3 months before the flight, you get a lower price. 2 weeks before, you get a little higher price. 2 days before, you get an even higher price. And then there are those folks who get standby tickets. So a standby ticket, just you purchase the ability to go from point A to point B. You don't necessarily get on a specific plane, right? You show up to the airport and you just wait for them to have space for you on a plane that's going from point A to point B. These are people who really have very high elasticity of demand because you're willing to just show up at the airport and hope to get on an airplane, right? You don't care when you get there, which airplane you get on. So these are people that you charge a much lower price to just to get them to come in the door and help fill some seats that otherwise might go empty. But this is price discrimination and an example of why a firm might practice price discrimination.